Hi everyone, my name is Samantha Carlson, and the social issue that I decided to discuss is touching a stranger's child. I'm sure people listening are either like, oh my goodness, who would touch a stranger's child? And then there's probably people who are like, oh wait, I've done that before. So let me tell you why that's an issue, and we can discuss reasons and ways to stop this issue. So, what is the problem? The problem is any form of touching, whether that's pinching, petting, high fiving, if it's a child that's not yours and you do not have permission. And even though I highlight strangers in this video, this really should apply to anyone, even if you know the child, even if you know the parents. Please don't touch somebody else's child without asking them. You never know the limitations and boundaries of a child unless you ask. So go ahead and ask. Make sure you do that. You can never be too cautious. So I'm going to highlight a few reasons why this is a problem, and probably one of the most obvious one to other people is germs. So big people have big germs, and the example that I love to use for this one is my sister and her husband because they both work at Dayton Children's, and they had a 1-month-old son who contracted RSV, and it turned out that they actually gave it to them. All three of them, my sister and her husband and her son, all tested positive for RSV, but neither my sister or her husband had symptoms. So a lot of the time, adults can transmit illnesses that they don't know that they have. And so it's really important that adults are not interacting with children unless they ask because they could be spreading things unknowingly. At any given time, parents can expect rotavirus, COVID, flu, RSV, and so many other things to be traveling around. So it's important that we keep that in mind. Another reason is that unsafe adults do not always look like this. It's not always some sketchy person trying to lure a kid into the back of a van with candy or a puppy. Unsafe adults can really look like anyone. And so, as a parent, you never really know if someone approaching your child is safe or not. And so, oftentimes, it's better to just not approach a child at all because you don't want to make that parent or that child uncomfortable. So, as a parent, you never know somebody's intentions, so it's important to be on the lookout for that and be aware of those strangers. So, another reason, and the one that I think is probably most ambiguous and controversial, is personal boundaries. Because in our individualistic culture, we definitely have a social norm of personal space. We don't like our personal space being invaded. At least I know as an adult, it makes me uncomfortable when a stranger comes into my personal space. So, I think the issue here is that there is a gray line, and a lot of people don't know whether or not children should be included in that social norm, and I think they absolutely should be. I think children are every bit as entitled to personal space as we are. Obviously, that might not account for like me and my daughter because I have to do things like change her diapers and get her dressed, whether or not she wants to, but that absolutely should apply to a stranger who is not entitled to being in her personal space. So, lastly, children are not an object or a commodity. If you stop and think, why are people even wanting to touch somebody else's child? You're going to think about, oh, they're so cute. So, they're probably doing it for enjoyment and pleasure of some sort. But my child should not be the source of your enjoyment and pleasure. That's not what they're there for. And no one is entitled to my child. And when I say this, I even mean my family. I mean, I'm very close with my siblings and my parents, and same thing with my husband's side, but not a single person in our family is above our boundaries and our rules for our children. And the same goes for strangers. Not a single person is entitled to my children except my husband and I. So we've discussed why this is an issue. Let's talk about a few ways to fix it. One of my favorite ways is by keeping your baby close. And if you look in this picture, this dad has his baby in a baby carrier. And this is something that I do all the time because we've discussed how personal space is a social norm that we value in our society. And we've discussed that it's a little bit more obvious and a little less ambiguous to talk about adult personal space. Most of us expect that adults have personal space that should be respected. So by keeping your baby close to you, you're taking your personal space and making it your baby's personal space as well. And so by bringing your baby into your personal space, people are a lot less likely to invade that and a lot less likely to come into your personal space to touch your baby. So because they don't want to violate that social norm. Another one, and sometimes this can be a little bit uncomfortable as a parent, but simply educate them. Explain that you can have big germs and your illnesses can be contracted to my child. Or explain, I never know a stranger's intentions. I'm sure you have the best of intentions, but I don't know. So, as a precaution, we don't let any strangers touch our child. And so, again, sometimes this one can take a little bit of courage to stand up to a stranger and say, this is why I don't want you touching my child. But maybe in doing so, they won't be as likely to touch somebody else's child. So, another way, and this kind of falls a little bit under educating them, but draw a clear social boundary. Let them know exactly where that social norm lies. Because, like I said, it's pretty obvious for us adults that we like personal space, but let them know that your child and other children as well are entitled to that social norm of personal space. Because it's not. It's really not acceptable to touch somebody else's child, but not everybody knows that. And often it's either grandparents who were raised in a different generation where they didn't have to worry about things like your kids getting kidnapped or COVID, or it's going to be people who don't have children, usually. It's usually one of those two. But either way, people do not like violating social norms. It makes them uncomfortable. It usually receives negative reactions, and they're kind of viewed as deviant, and people don't like that. So, by drawing that clear social norm and letting them know exactly where your child sits on that norm, you're going to make them uncomfortable and make them less likely to do that behavior again. So, this is the last slide and probably my personal favorite, but uno reverse and make them uncomfortable. If someone comes up and pinches your child's cheeks, pinch their cheeks. Pinch their cheeks. What are they going to do? They're going to say, oh my goodness, why are you touching me? And you're going to say, oh, well, I thought it was okay because you touched my child. Why are you entitled to more personal space than my child? This is going to make them so uncomfortable. It's going to make them realize that they did something wrong. And they're going to realize, oh my goodness, I love having my personal space respected. I can't believe I would violate somebody else's personal space. Or you can make a scene and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would touch my baby. Now, the reason you're going to do this is because this makes other people aware that they violated a social norm, and not only that, it's going to affect their social perception. It's going to affect the way that other people view them, and at least myself and most of us probably want to be viewed in a positive way by other people. So when that attention is turned to you, and it's turned to you in a negative way, that's going to make people uncomfortable. It's going to make them want to say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize I did something wrong, so that they can return to that positive social perception. And honestly, it might make them look at themselves a little bit. It might make them do some little introspection and realize, oh, why would I even do this in the first place? It might make them feel a little bit silly. So there are some reasons why it's an issue and some ways to fix it, and hopefully after watching this video, you will not try to touch a stranger's baby. So thank you so much for listening, and have a good rest of your day.